Good afternoon, everybody. Super excited to see all of you here. I am Dr. Laura Escobar Ratliff, and I'm a clinical assistant professor as well as the director of the DSW program. I am so honored and excited to introduce Sharika Smith. Ms. Smith is a licensed clinical social worker who serves as a mental health coordinator for Fayette County Public Schools. She is passionate about providing mental health services to Black male trauma survivors. Ms. Smith is presenting her capstone entitled Transforming Hurt Boys, Restored Men, the Lack of Mental Health Treatment for Black Male Trauma Survivors. Thank you again for being here with us today. Ms. Smith, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. I am so excited to be here, mainly because that means we're done. But everybody on this call, I'm very excited to share what we've been working on for the last 2 years. I'm very excited to show my passion when it comes to trauma, but especially the trauma that our Black boys and our Black men are facing currently and every day. So bear with me. This is the first time I'm presenting this. You all are the first audience. So I'm excited that you all are here, and I just want to thank you all so much for your time. So let's get right into it. In the event that technology messes up, we're just going to keep it moving. So I can see Dr. ER. Am I good on the sharing? Awesome, thank you. Okay, so like Dr. ER said, my capstone is titled Transforming Hurt Boys into Restored Men. And the premise of this is just really discussing the lack of mental health treatment for Black male trauma survivors, right? We have a lot of, I can't wait to kind of just share with you what I've learned and what I've researched, but most importantly, to answer the question, what can we do to make this change? So I am ready and nervous, but we're gonna do it. All right, so many factors have really went into my choice for this capstone. It is very, it's a huge passion of mine. However, I've lived through trauma. I know people who have suffered from traumatic situations. I know Black men personally who have had the worst situations happen to them as children and had no access to mental health treatment. And they're actually feeling that right now as adults. So again, just knowing the impact that trauma can have on one's life. As adults, we tend to have the coping skills, right? We know what to do. We can pretty much get through a traumatic situation. But then when you imagine those situations happening to a child, they don't always have those coping skills. So in my 2 areas of work, I work as a school social worker as well as a clinician on a private agency on the side. I truly have seen the effects of this firsthand. So the first question I just wanted to really answer was, what are the effects of untreated childhood trauma for Black males? I really want to dig into what that looks like. We can put a label on things. We can guess why people are acting the way that they do, but I really want us to learn what those effects are. All right, so I started providing therapy in December of 2020. That was a COVID move. So to this day, a year and a half later, I've not had one Black male client. I've not seen one Black male client come through my office, okay? The only Black boy, I've had one Black boy, and the only reason why he was there is because his mom was threatened with a CPS call, okay? So again, just seeing this firsthand, seeing this in my work in both the school system as well as private practice, I truly set out to answer my next question, which was, why do Black male trauma survivors rarely seek out treatment? Why is mental health not an answer for our Black families, our Black boys? All right, and most importantly, I think we all need to really just think about how we can help. I really want to help us answer that question today, and hopefully we can get some good ideas. So as many of you all know, we had to do a doctoral capstone and had to write 3 major papers that could really stand alone, but I was so excited to kind of put all 3 of these papers together. We had a systematic literature review, a conceptual paper, and a case application. So with this presentation, I kind of want to touch on a broad area of those, but again, the the overall goal for this presentation is to leave you with some takeaways and next steps. We always have to start with the definition, right? What is trauma? A very, very important thing to remember about trauma is my trauma may not be your trauma. My trauma, if something happens to me, it may affect me in a completely different way if the same event happened to another person. So please remember that trauma is one's perception, just the fear of intense fear, a situation that causes intense fear, horror, or helplessness. Some of those examples include neglect, accidents, physical violence, sexual abuse, physical abuse. And again, even though some of these situations happen and in anyone's mind, it seems like, oh, that would be so traumatic for anyone to endure. Your trauma is not my trauma. My trauma is not yours. One Black boy's trauma may not be the other one's. So really thinking about how it's affecting a person as an individual. So an astounding fact that I was able to find in my research is just how much higher a percentage Black males experience trauma than their white peers. Okay. That number is astounding. Yet what's even more astounding is they are less likely to seek the mental health treatment. Okay, so what that results in is those poor mental health outcomes that we see in adults. Just talking about children, when they struggle with trauma, it manifests in different ways. So with children, a lot of times we see academic struggles, we see dropouts, we see academic failure. We also see involvement in the juvenile justice system. A lot of times we have students who are in juvenile detention centers who were there because of a behavior, obviously, that got them there. But when you truly dig down into the why and what happened, we realized there was a traumatic event that he did not know how to manage. He did not get any help for. And then finally, of course, the social issues and relationship issues, very much difficulty finding, being able to connect with other people. So those are kind of the symptoms that we see of the impact of trauma in childhood. What that leads to, especially when it's untreated, is some of our adults, our Black men are dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder. They're dealing with depression, substance abuse, a lot of times violence perpetration or just incarceration, and then dangerous sexual behaviors, which includes multiple sex partners, having unprotected sex often. So these are just a few of those symptoms, but sometimes we see that in adulthood. Now, again, my trauma is not your trauma, so please don't leave this presentation and say, any adult who suffers from this must have had a traumatic childhood. That's not what I'm saying, okay? And I'm not saying that every child who deals with these symptoms is gonna have those outcomes. However, it just increases the likelihood, and it's something that we have to address and make note of. So these statistics I was able to find from my systematic literature review. These are the ones that stood out to me. They are powerful, they are hurtful, but it's definitely worth mentioning in this presentation. Okay, so we have 62% of Black males who have experienced a traumatic event. Okay, actually gone through this event directly. 72% witnessed a traumatic event, which again could be just as traumatic as actually going through it, right? However, 56 to 74% of those Black males do not seek mental health treatment. Okay, so that's half of them, almost to a third. It's astounding how many people go through these situations but do not seek out the treatment. And I'll dig deeper into this last statistic, but it has to be acknowledged now. Less than 2% of the practitioners or members of the APA, which is the Psychological Association, are Black. All right, so we have less than 2% of these providers who are trying to work with these Black men, and less than 2% of them are Black themselves. We'll dig into that deeper, and I do want to discuss the why on that, why that's important. So I do want to give a trigger warning. These are just a few 30 seconds to a minute snippet videos. However, there was a woman named Trey Kearney. She created a podcast. It's called Men Hurt Too. She interviewed these 3 Black men about the impact of trauma on Black men in America. Okay, so again, just a kind of trigger warning. They're only 30 seconds to a minute. However, they're powerful, they're hurtful. So just want to give you a little heads up.
I have one thing that's like is in the back of my head.
And actually, I didn't share my sound, so I'm going to do that one more time. So you can truly hear it. Dr. ER, can you see it?
The Black man. I have 3 sons.
I got into the
Hold
away
on, sorry.
7 years ago.
Trauma that does
And,
not leave you. Trauma that
I messed up my flow there. Let me do this again.
I have one thing that's like is in the back of my head. Well, as a kid, I wore it as a badge, right? So when I was like 8 or 9, well, I was like 8, and my brother was 9, I had a family member that used to make us have sex with her. So being 8 or 9 years old, I could tell people that I had sex already. Like, I'm not a virgin at 8 or 9. Like, so all through my childhood and all through teenage years, that was a badge, like saying I had sex before you. Like, I've been doing this. But going into adulthood and then having my kids of my own and realizing how fragile a 8-year-old is at that age, it was wrong.
All right, so like I said, a quick 30 seconds snippet of this man's trauma. The question that was asked to these 3 men was, describe a traumatic event that has not left you, okay? So as an adult now, that's the number one thing that he said. I do want to acknowledge, and this is acknowledged later in the podcast as well, as a young boy, you know, he can say, I had sex, right? I had sex with an older woman. Oh my gosh, I'm so cool, right? But we have to acknowledge what that is. That is rape. That is sexual abuse. And this boy, whatever we want to call it, whatever we you know, want to give excuses. Well, you know, there were a family friend teaching them how to be a man. No, it's rape, and a lot of our Black men have dealt with that. And it's very difficult to admit it, but again, until we acknowledge it, until we give it a label, we're going to continue to call it something what it's not. All right, moving on to Mark Thompson.
trauma that does not leave you.
One thing in particular that jumps out at me is I think I was 15 and my mom's boyfriend, you know, put his hands on my mom. And, you know, I watched that since I was like 12 to like 15. And then, you know, I started getting muscles. So
Right.
we had like a physical confrontation. And I told him, hey, you never hit my mom again. And I beat him up. You know, I hate to say it that way, but I said, you know, and as a young kid, you think it's over. But I was traumatized because after the physical confrontation with him, my mom got back together with him. So I was under the impression as a 15-year-old that it was going to be over. We could leave now. But because of, you know, her dysfunction at that particular point in her life, she went back to him. So I had to do something to get away from that before I put myself in harm's way. So I moved away from my mom at that particular time because it was the best thing for me to do at that point in my life. And that experience right there caused me to have some depression because, you know, I was like, man, my mom, she's supposed to love me more than she loves him. So that over time created like depression within me. And what I learned from that particular experience, we start self-medicating when we have this heaviness on our heart. Some people use drugs, some people drink. For me, it was sex. I had this insatiable appetite to want to have sex. And, you know, as time progressed and I was able to make connections from going to professional counseling for like 15 months as a freshman in college, that's when the counselor helped me make connections as to where that heaviness came from that I was carrying all of those particular years.
All right, a short snippet about his experience with domestic violence. Okay, we can dig so much deeper in that, because not only was there domestic violence in the home, but there was also this feeling of, I fought for you as a young boy. I fought for my mom, and she still chose him. Right. And so again, we can dig deeper in that. That's another presentation, but just another little snippet of one of the traumatic events that some of our young boys and Black men go through. Next is Mac Stanley.
Being a Black male therapist just that tagline alone has opened my eyes to all of the microaggressions that I've experienced in this field. I remember my first day at my internship. I walked in and I identified myself and was told by a Caucasian lady, "Wow, you dress nice for a Black guy." Needless to say, that was my last day. Walked out right then and there.
So even when we have, when we break that stigma, right, or when we break the stereotype that Black men aren't supposed to be successful, that's what society tells us. We have a Black therapist who walks in and immediately he's met with those words. Okay, microaggressions happen all the time, especially to Black men, and I think it kind of leads to imposter syndrome, right? I'm here, I'm successful, I broke the generational curse, I did everything right, quote unquote. Yet you're still making me feel like I don't belong here. Again, a lot of some of these things may not be admitted by Black men, but they happen way more often than not. So I wanted to share that with you all. So my systematic literature review really dug deep into the adulthood, the outcomes, kind of like we mentioned before, and then also especially the whys. So one, I'm just going to touch on a couple of the outcomes of child trauma and what that looks like in adulthood. When we talk about incarceration rates, already the United States wins the prize for the highest prison population. Okay, digging deeper. When you truly look at the people in prison, there's an extreme prevalence of traumatic event experiences in both the juvenile detention centers and in the adult jails. Black men are imprisoned 6 times higher than white men. And then of course, the higher the traumatic experiences, the higher risk of criminality. So thinking about who's in jail, thinking about our consequences of some of our behaviors, and the answer is to throw our Black boys and throw our Black men behind bars, makes me truly think, even if they end up there, where's the rehabilitation, right? I have this vision of going into the jail, the juvenile system, and going into the jails and actually providing some trauma therapy and truly getting down to the reasons behind these behaviors, of what got them there in the first place. Another thing that weighs heavy on my heart is just, like I said, the lack of mental health resources behind bars. I think that could be another capstone for another degree. So we'll put that to the side. So another outcome that was very, very prominent in my research was the prevalence of depression and PTSD among our Black men. almost 22 and a half of Black people reported having a serious mental illness. This research, that study by SAMHSA was done in 2018. That's a few years ago, right? A, I think it's going to be higher now. And B, how many Black men or how many Black people do not even admit to that? So I think the statistic right there is low because of those 2 reasons. There's been an increase in Black people who have suicidal thoughts, plans to die by suicide, and even who have attempted suicide. And then we have Black men who are reporting sadness and hopelessness more than our white counterparts. And when we talk about what depression and sadness looks like in men, a lot of time, and young boys, a lot of times it's anger, it's aggression, it's defiance. Okay. And then we circle all the way back because that stuff is what gets us locked up, right? And so then our incarceration rates increase. One final outcome that was very prevalent, again, there's more, but these are the 3 ones that I kind of really honed in on, is substance abuse. We have Black men with mental illnesses and those adults who admit to childhood abuse, huge increase in binge drinking and misusing illicit drugs. So the next is the why. I really wanted to dig into the reason why our Black men and our Black boys don't seek out mental health treatment. I kind of narrowed it down to these 3 quotes. Real men don't cry. If I could get a show of hands of how many times we've heard that, everybody in the Zoom room would probably raise their hand. Real men aren't supposed to cry. Society tells us that. Our Black men believe that. Our Black boys are believing that. And that is truly the stigma of what we see in our Black communities. Mental health is not a regular conversation around our tables, right? Around Black families in our homes. And so the challenge is truly, how do we normalize mental health services? How do we normalize that it's okay to cry? How do we normalize that while it does take a village, you know, we do have that mentality of it takes a village. We can't let that imply that we can't seek help outside of that village, okay? A lot of times we have our Black communities that rely on church and rely on each other, and that's amazing, right? But sometimes we can't pray the symptoms away. We have to pray, we have to go to church, we have to believe what you believe, if that's what you choose to do. However, a lot of times that stops our Black community from seeking help outside of that. So the next one, this quote, "You'll never understand me." In my mind, that goes to the lack of cultural competency in the mental health field, okay? The stat that I showed you earlier, where less than 2% of the APA were Black practitioners. It's very difficult to find practitioners of color, even more difficult to find Black men as mental health clinicians, okay? Now, I'm not saying that Black therapists are the only ones who can work with Black men. That's not what I'm saying. However, we do have Black men who tend to fear, if I go to this, you know, white man, if I go to this white lady, even if I go to a woman, period, she's not going to understand me. They're not going to understand me. They have not experienced what I've experienced. So if I go to someone who does not come from where I come from, you know, they're not going to be able to fix me, quote unquote. So a lot of times when we finally do get our Black men to come through the door, sometimes they're met with discrimination. Sometimes they're met with bias. Already, the clinicians have this stereotype behind in their minds of what this is going to be. I'm sure he's here for this reason. And so just having that negative interaction when we finally do get our Black men in is another reason why they stop coming, right? And then finally, you don't hear me. A lot of times our Black boys and our Black men are either overdiagnosed or they're misdiagnosed. I was very surprised to see that you have a Black man and a white man who come to the psychiatrist or come to the doctor with the same symptoms. The Black man gets labeled with schizophrenia. The white man gets labeled with a mood disorder, okay? That research is out there, and it was pretty astounding to see that. Also, some of our Black men are not prescribed medication or therapy. That's not even an option. You know, I'm going to the doctor, I'm looking to you for help, tell me what to do. And medication and therapy aren't even on the table, right? Oh, you'll be fine, pray it away, or whatever they say. So what that leads to is self-medicating. So a lot of times our Black men are forced to self-medicate, again, tying back to substance abuse, right? And then of course, the overall inadequate access to mental health care. If you joined Sinead's presentation right before mine, she touched on the important factor of financial barriers and financial stressors. A lot of times our insurance won't cover mental health treatment, or it covers this much and you got to pay this much. The co-pays are too big. And when you're faced with, hey, I need to buy groceries versus go to this therapist who probably is not going to listen to me anyway, what are you going to choose, right? All right, B.B. Moore Campbell sums it up perfectly for me. People of color, particularly African Americans, feel the stigma more keenly. In a race-conscious society, some don't want to be perceived as having yet another deficit. I really feel like, you know, Black men are born with a strike already, just for being 2 strikes, right? You're born a male and you're born a Black male. A Black man having to admit I need help, I need to seek mental health treatment, it's another strike. Who wants to get yet another strike solely for admitting that they need help? So moving on to the conceptual part of my capstone, I really tried to push clinicians to think outside the box. When it comes to working with our Black boys, when it comes to working with our Black men, we have to do something different because what we're trying to do is not working. So being intentional about protective factors, if you ever take a trauma-informed care training, you'll know that protective factors are huge with preventing mental health outcomes and helping with traumatic situations. So just ensuring that we have healthy practices for our young boys, that there's family support, they have regular school attendance, all of those things can be helpful. I truly believe we need to teach mental wellness at a young age. We have to be intentional about our SEL curriculum, our social emotional learning curricula that we have in our schools. And why can't we have lessons specific for Black males, right? A lot of times it's about which house is burning right now, and it's our Black men. So really being specific to the coping skills that they need to deal with some of the specific traumas that they have. And then very important, parent trainings alongside our educators. These are the adults that we look to. Our Black boys are looking to our parents, to their parents, are looking to the guardians, are looking to the teachers and educators. So us as adults, we as adults have to know the signs and symptoms of trauma. We have to know how it affects our Black boys and our Black men. We have to be willing to train our community and go to the churches and train. I do think when you think of all these things, you know, whose job is it to make sure that the protective factors are there? Is it the parent's job, right? Is it the school's job, the churches, or is it all of the above? Now that truly takes a village. Who says that therapy had to be in a building or on the couch, right? I truly feel like if the treatment location is the barrier, then you got to remove the walls. I have this vision of providing therapy in non-threatening areas, right? So meeting the client where they are. We can have therapy outside. We can go to the park. We can go to a church and set up inside the church. This is where, if this is where my Black men and my Black boys are going to be, then I will go to you. I truly am encouraging therapists to take it out of the scary white building, right? And go to the clients. I can't remember who I was talking to, but we had a conversation about barbers, or actually the vice versa, social workers and clinicians being certified in barbering. I don't know if that's what the word is, to cut hair, right? So I go at the Black man, go to my barber, who's really a counselor, and I have my session there while I get my hair cut, right? Because we know they're going to go to the barber shop. It's one client at a time. It's you're there for that reason, and you're not. There's no intimidating eye contact. A lot of times our Black men and Black boys can't make eye contact and truly open up. So you're doing something while you're still kind of opening up. And honestly, why can't we ask the client, where are you most comfortable, right? Let's ask them, where would you like to have this session? I know that it's awkward to be here, but what's going to work for you? I will come to you. So for the practitioners on the call, I do also want to encourage a couple of steps. Making sure that we are trauma informed, okay? We have to stop asking our Black boys, what did you do? And instead we have to ask them what happened to you. That is probably the most profound thing that I have learned over these years as a clinician. It's just changing that mindset, changing that question. Using systems theory, I truly think you have to figure out what's influencing the behaviors. Is it the environment? Is it family? Is it organizations, friends, your social setting, and truly incorporating that into the treatment. Critical race theory, I feel like there's a huge fight about that right now. I'm not going to dig deeply into that. However, that's obvious. We have to acknowledge the history. We have to acknowledge the past. We have to acknowledge that Black people don't trust white people, right? We have to acknowledge those things. That's going to make the therapeutic alliance between that client and that therapist even better. So just being equitable and acknowledging those things that our Black boys and our Black men are going through, right? Society criticizes Black men for their Blackness. We have to acknowledge that. And I truly think with critical race theory, that's really the base of it in my mind. I could be wrong, but I really think it's about seeing where we came from to really figure out why we are where we are. Any time that you can use your platform to educate and advocate for Black boys and Black men, no matter what place you're in, I think that is key. That's going to help us with being empathetic and just understanding some of the discrimination and stigma that our Black men face. And then another suggestion for practitioners is about the ACE study, which we'll get into in just a bit. When talking about my conceptual paper, a lot of our professors would ask the question, what's your contribution to the field, right? As a social worker, as a clinician, what's your contribution? So I do have a grand idea and who knows if it will go anywhere beyond this presentation, but I truly think it makes sense to me. So I'm really hoping that you all agree with me. So adverse childhood experiences, I know a lot of people on the call understand what those are, but just in case, I'm going to kind of give a quick background. These experiences are events, traumatic events that have those long-lasting effects on adults, okay? The higher or the more ACEs, the more adverse childhood experiences that one has, the more likely they are to have mental health issues, physical health issues, even death, chronic health issues. So again, this study is basically given to people to see what was the trauma that you suffered in childhood. How many of these situations between 1 and 10 did you endure? So I can, take that and help you with your with the mental health treatment plan. So very abbreviated questionnaire here. I kind of took the huge ACE study and abbreviated it just so we can see what it includes, right? 1 through 10, verbal abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, lack of affection, neglect, alcoholism, DV, mental illness in your family, incarceration, okay? Glancing at this list, when we are considering our Black boys and our Black men, what's missing? You're more than welcome to say it out loud or put it in the chat. What is missing?
Racial trauma.
Racial trauma. Anything else? Oh, I thought someone was talking. My thoughts, and again, the work that I put into this is truly digging into those traumatic experiences that are specific to African-American culture and African-American boys and men, okay? So I truly wanted to propose an addendum to the ACE. I know the ACE has been around longer than I've probably been born. However, we truly have to consider that the ACE is whitewashed. The ACE is, it does not capture the racial trauma. So the 5 questions in my mind that I feel like could easily be added to this, I called it ACE AA for African American. Number 1, were you ever called a racial slur, either to your face with the intent of degrading you or hurting your feelings, indirectly, but you're still aware of the slur being used? Number 2, did you ever have a negative experience with the police while being pulled over with no probable cause, excessive force to detain you or a family member? Number 3, has anyone made comments to you that could be considered microaggression? Okay. 4, have you ever felt stressed from repeatedly seeing racially traumatic events in the media or family or friends being killed or targeted for being Black? These questions aren't asked on that ACE, the ACE 1.0 or whatever you will, right? However, when you put these situations that are specific to our Black boys and our Black men, and you add that to the ACE score, you have a whole new treatment plan, okay? The goal isn't to get a high number, you win the prize. The goal is, let me see what your number is and see what your trauma is, so my treatment plan matches that. If I'm just creating a treatment plan based on the other 10 questions, I'm missing all this, right? So this was something that I thought of. I know that there are some supplemental questions for the regular ACE, but this is specific to our African-American culture, right? In a grand world, if I were to ever write another paper, I would propose that we have this addendum for other cultures as well, right? We have our Latinx families who deal with it, deportation, immigration. We have Native American families who have their own set of cultural trauma. So again, I think we need to deviate from 1 through 10 and have addendums for some of those different events that happen in our other cultures. So really quickly, I want to lead you through Barry. He was my sample in this case study. And I just kind of want to do a quick activity while we kind of go through this presentation. So this is Barry's timeline at 6 years old. That was when the sexual abuse started. Okay. At 8 years old, Barry's parents got divorced. At 10, Barry's close friend died by suicide. At 17, he became an unaccompanied minor.
Sir, I have a question. I
Uh-huh.
hope you can help me.
Go ahead. Oh, she must not be talking to me. All right, so at age 38, now what? We see the trauma that Barry has gone through. I really want you all to think about what, as an adult, again, we can assume what traumatic events, we can't assume, we know what traumatic events he's gone through, but with him not seeking mental health treatment, what outcomes can we assume that Barry is going through as an adult? You can scan the QR code or go to slido.com and type in that code. What outcomes can you assume that Barry's going through, knowing his trauma history?
Maybe depression as an outcome?
Absolutely. And look, right there, depression. Somebody read your mind. What else? And if you don't have access to this, you can totally say it out loud. That's completely fine. Anxiety, untreated mental health issues, anger, hopelessness, substance abuse, guilt.
What about trying to fit in?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Trying to fit in. So that social, the issues with making friends, right? Building strong relationships and healthy relationships. Excuse me, PTSD, isolation, all of these issues. At 38, sadness. At 38, Barry absolutely has every one of these because of all of that trauma that he dealt with as a kid that was untreated, right? Left untreated. Thank you all for participating in that. I think it's when you see it on paper, you see the history, right? And then we can see this on paper, then I think it hits home. So I appreciate you all doing that. So I have heard this song at least 20 times since starting my coursework. A few months ago, I heard it and I truly listened to it. I listened to the words. I played it again and I was like, oh my gosh, this is my entire capstone. So I want you to read the lyrics while I play. And some of you all, you're more than welcome to sing along, but I really want you to read the lyrics.
I was told the true definition of a man was to never cry, work till you're tired, got to provide, always be the rock for my fam, protect them by all means, and give you the things that you need, baby. Our relationship is suffering, trying to give you what I never had. You say I don't know how to love you, babe. Well, I say show me the way. I keep my feelings deep inside, I shadow them with my pride. I'm trying desperately, baby, just work with me. Show me the way to surrender my heart. Girl, I'm so lost. Yeah. Teach me how to love. Yeah. How I can get my emotions involved. Yeah. Teach me, show me how to love. Show me the way to surrender my heart. Girl, I'm so lost. Teach me how to love. How I can get my emotions involved. Yeah. Teach me how to love. I was always
I could play the entire song. It's so relevant. Musiq Soulchild is the artist and he's written amazing music, but this song truly helps depict the struggles of our Black men. And again, I've heard this song, I've sung along with it a million times, but truly listening to those words, he's crying out for, just teach me. I want to learn, show me how to love, teach me how to love. I've always been taught, to hide those feelings. And I'm trying to be able to love other people, but I need to be taught those things. So.
Thought to be strong.
My bad.
Never.
All right, so I truly want to leave you all with some nuggets and just next steps as we kind of wrap up, this quote is huge, right? Untreated mental health disorders and unmanaged stress are silent killers of Black men. We have to change that. We have to change that. So if we have any parents on the call, talk about trauma and mental health with your kids, especially your young Black boys. What happens in the family does not always need to stay in the family, right? There's sometimes when we have to go outside and say, I need help, okay? Educators on the call, know the signs and symptoms of trauma. If you see something, say something. I do feel like when we educate ourselves as educators, the adults who are placed in charge of these Black boys, we have to be educated ourselves. Any clinicians, be sure to ask questions to your clients and listen to their answers. Truly thinking about what works for one client may not work for another, and being very intentional in creating a treatment plan that's for him. And then everybody in the community, it truly takes a village to eradicate the stigma of mental health. So once we normalize it, once we talk about it, then we can share it and advocate for our Black boys and our men. And to our Black men, you must acknowledge the hurt and the trauma. And until then, we can start the transformation process, and then that will lead to restoration. I'm not living in a Black man's shoes. I'm not living in your shoes. But you have so many people around you who are trying to love you, and it's difficult. I want to leave you with a quote by myself. The lives of Black men are vital and valuable enough to save. We as people must advocate for early mental health interventions with hopes of changing the trajectory of their lives. I hope that you all have an open mind with me and truly have thought through what this means for our Black boys, our Black men, and us as women, us as Black women, white educators, anybody on this call. Everybody on this call knows a Black boy or a Black man, right? Everybody on this call can use, hopefully, this information. And so, again, I just appreciate your time, and that's all I got. A couple of resources, of course. If anybody wants to share comments or has questions, I am here and will answer them.
Sharika, I have a quick question. You almost got me.
I don't know where that came from. It's your fault today.
Almost. You got me. But that ACE, wow, that is amazing. I love that, Sharika. A lot of people said you better publish that ASAP because it's needed. That work is needed. My question about the ACE would be, how would that be scored? We know the ACE is scored on a scale, with 10. So would that be a scale of 14, or would you just add that on top of the 10 so you can get a score 12 out of 10? So
yeah, I think in my mind, I feel like it can just add to the 10, right? Because again, the goal is not to have the highest score. It's about, what does that truly mean? What does this number mean? So me as a clinician, I can formulate that treatment plan, exactly how it's supposed to be, right? I don't want to treat you for all these other issues, without acknowledging that racial consideration in that. Thanks, Danae. I appreciate that question, because yeah, I could probably, put more than 4 questions on there. And so I think in the event that it does, people are able to use it, if they add more to it, that's completely fine, right? Again, your score may go higher, but you have a framework of how am I going to formulate this treatment plan around this client, because he's dealt with this, and this. So.
Ms. Smith, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm swell. A great presentation, first and foremost. But you and I were definitely on the same frequency. I'm a barber, and I'll be 38 next month. And I just had my first therapy session of my life last month. And that's something that I've been working on. I live in Louisville. My barbershop is trying to gather as many Black therapists as I can to offer their information in the barbershop and to have them come into the shop maybe one Friday or one Saturday a month to properly educate us as Black men, because that's the first flaw that we have is we're not properly educated on mental health. And then we don't have education about ourselves. We don't know ourselves. We haven't self-educated ourselves about who we really are.
Oh, yeah.
And how do we face the trauma from society, and then the trauma from the streets, and then of course the trauma at home. Because from my perspective, you know, as a barber, I'm a psychologist, I'm a therapist, I'm a doctor. I kind of do it all, and I always think about what's being poured into the Black boys and into the Black men, and then it always just brings me back to the influence that hip hop has, that music is having on us as Black boys and Black men. And now, you know, as a barber, I see all of these young men who come into the shop, and every single one of them has a gun with an extended clip, you know, hanging out of his pocket. And then I think about how does that correlate with the rise in suicide rates now that everybody has guns? You know, it's an open and carry state, so you know they can do as they please.
Right.
But I could talk all day. But yeah, we definitely need to get together about that. I want to see what you guys are doing in regards to, you know, heighten the awareness of barbers and how we can utilize the shop, you know, our country club, you know, to heighten this information and to bring awareness to this, especially, you know, as Black men, we need to become aware of this.
I 100% agree with you, CJ. And you actually made me think, even if the barbers aren't trained clinicians, right? The barbers can be educated to say, hey man, this is a person you should go to, because we naturally go to our hairdresser. Women do it too. We go to our hairdressers and we just spill out everything, right? So even if a Black man comes in and gets his haircut, if the barber is not the actual clinician, the barber can be well versed and say, this is where you need to go. You know, I will be here and we can talk, but I really encourage you to, you know, if that communication is happening in those spaces, then that really is the community getting those resources out. Let's connect.
Absolutely. I'll get your information from Sine.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Hello, future Dr. Smith. This is me Burks over here. Hey. Well, I just first and foremost want to say that I am so proud of you and this work that you have done and put your heart into, and we see and hear your passion to the topic, just in what you're talking about. As a sister, you have nephews and just people that you know personally. So I really want to say thank you. And I think just what CJ was talking about was a conversation you were a part of, I think, a week or so ago, and really trying to do that collaboration within the community of trying to get into where our Black men are, and really trying to look around. So I think the barbershop did come up because we know
I said I knew I was talking to somebody.
Yes, that was at the trauma training.
Yes,
that was brought up. And so, I appreciate CJ for saying that, because that is a place I do believe that the work that you're talking about here, I think is starting to get out a little bit more, with mental health, but this will even make it more of a push to see. So I think what he's talking about, you need to tap into that and get that ACE, whatever that is, get that, whatever, the copyright, or whoever knows how to do it, let's get it done, because you can create that, as you said, in that. And then there's other areas, too, that you can look and tap in to help people. But I just want to say, job well done, and I can't be more proud of you.
Thank you. I appreciate you so much.
Hey, Dr. Daughter Smith.
Hey, Daddy.
Hey, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you. Some of the ACE things, just, I grew up with a few of them, witnessing them. When you talk about community, that's who kind of kept me on this straight and narrow and not letting that affect me. We're talking, like 70s, 80s, 60s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. Sorry, I told my age, but anyway. But I got a brand new insight on what's really going on today, because I'm one of the ones that say, why are they doing this? What happened? Who dropped the ball? This really opened my eyes to a lot of, instead of blaming them, well, why don't they change? This opened my eyes on to how can we help them change?
Wow. Yeah.
And you know, like I said, I'm really proud of you, but like I said, when I was coming up in my day, I experienced that same stuff, and it was we had help then, and we're talking about the village
Right.
that you mentioned. You know, as you know, my mama didn't play, but so Miss Johnson across the street didn't play either. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that's what we're lacking. But since we don't have that anymore, your presentation really opened a lot of eyes and made me realize that, hey, I need to get out here and I need to do something more myself.
Awesome.
To help out where I can. But I love you and I really appreciate this. And thank you for inviting me.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Daddy, for saying that. I appreciate that. Use your voice.
Oh, got to.
Sharika, as a mother, this is
Oh,
Kenya
Kenya.
with, yeah, sorry. I'm not on camera because I'm sitting in the parking lot waiting to pick up my son.
Oh, you're fine.
I didn't want to be a distraction to you. But as a mother of, my son just turned 12, and I have a 21-year-old already, and we've kind of had a lot of conversations with him. My children on paper would not be, you know, trauma children. You know, not that I know of. But I will say that I now see my 11-year-old who just turned 12 last week. He's starting to understand being Black is different.
Right.
And being a Black boy is different. Everything from his thick curly hair to the way people look at him for the choices he makes on how he dresses or walks or talks. So as a mom of a young child that is a brown boy, what would you say would be one of the most important things I can do for him right now at this critical age to help him embrace who he is and delight in who he is, and to put away the stereotypes that are trying to already impact him and limit him? Sorry. Okay, my turn to be emotional. Sorry.
It's all right. It's all right. I do not have children. I say I have 42,000 children in the school system, but I see that every day. And I honestly think other boys his age, that's very key, right? Getting them together, embracing that, having a male role model that can tell them, yes, we are different. Yes, we have these, but this is why it's so great. You as a mother, any adult needs to pour into those young people and repeatedly acknowledge the differences and beautify them, right? Say that you are beautiful this way, that way. Talk about them, you know, bring those to the table, acknowledge them, and somehow turn it into to be proud of that, right? There's nobody in this world that looks like you. You're the only you. And taking that and kind of running with that, but also getting into a community. I'm not assuming that your kids are on social media or in front of the TV or phone, but getting them into a community where the social skills are being taught, right? Instead of putting a phone in front of our kids' faces. And because right now the media is teaching our boys, you know, they're learning from YouTube and TikTok and all that, but they have to see us, they have to see the adults, and to talk about that and acknowledge that. I don't know if that answered your question, Kenya, but
No, it's a good point. Like I said, I wouldn't define them on paper as children with traumas, but I know that everyone is impacted differently, and I understand that people internalize things differently. So heck, for all I know, I could have traumatized them, for all I know. But I am seeing where he is now becoming very aware and making statements about, well, they treat me different because I'm Black, or that person did this because I'm, you know, he's starting to really, and I spend more time saying, honey, that's not true. Don't think like that. But now I'm looking at your presentation and I'm thinking, oh, this is true. And he needs to think like that. And I need to help him to understand how to process that better and understand that he's still important and special. So that was where my question came from.
Really quickly, also teaching him how to speak up, because when he feels like he's been wronged, there's an appropriate way to say, you know, Miss So-and-so, I really didn't appreciate the way that you said that about me, or my feelings are hurt because of this. Because what they're expecting is for the aggression or the defiance. They're expecting that. They're not expecting, a young Black boy to say, what you said was wrong. I didn't appreciate it. It hurt my feelings. Can we talk about it? So we as adults need to teach our young Black boys how to speak up and do it in a way that's not going to get them labeled as a bad boy, quote unquote, a bad kid.
And make them think that it's cool to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. You are welcome. You are welcome.
Your dad should be proud.
I think he is.
Oh, I am very much so.
Dr. Paul also put in the chat, sometimes it's difficult for parents to process this with their children. And so that is sometimes when therapy comes in. So even if parents don't have the answer, giving them that other, avenue of introducing them to someone who may be able to help with that. Thank you, Dr. Paul, for that.
Well, since you're saying my name, I want to give you a comment.
I called you out.
Watching your paper turn into that and the conceptualization of that from our conversations, I'm astounded. And I'm so proud of you, and congratulations.
Thank you. I could not have gotten here without you, darling. I appreciate you, Dr. Paul. You were very inspirational. I'll say that. Thank you.
Hey, Sharika.
Yes, ma'am. Oh, you had your
Hi.
hand up. Sorry.
No problem. And I have a 4 o'clock, so I gotta go. But first of all, amazing.
Thank you.
But I didn't expect anything less. I want to go back to your these racial trauma questions you want. These are ACEs questions, right? We know that they are. But during the pandemic, I had this conversation and we did some research. What I said was to parents and to teachers, specifically the teachers, and you're in FCPS, so you get this. When these kids, when it's time for the babies to leave being stuck in the home for 1.5 years, 2 years, and it's time to go back in school, and you see some behaviors, and it was, post Breonna, post George Floyd. My concern was that some of our younger, less experienced teachers who don't look like us would be weaponizing the SROs in the buildings, right? How quickly are you going to call law enforcement when you just don't have basic classroom management skills? Right. So in the school system, how do you help this manifest, and how do you train and get them to hear and see that?
That is powerful. My first immediate thought when you said that, some people, I don't say we, you're absolutely right, use police as a threat, right? If you don't do this, I'm gonna get the school law enforcement. If you don't do this, I think what we have to do, and our district does an amazing job providing training to those law enforcement officers, so they're trauma informed, right? They seek behaviors as opposed to seek punishment or consequences. So I think it starts there, but also, so even if a teacher does say, I'm gonna get the law enforcement officer, he's big and scary, he's gonna come get you. When he gets there, he's understanding, he's compassionate. We follow, what is it? Modeling, right? So if the kid sees that this big scary man or big scary, police officer, female, is really here to listen, and they have compassion, and they are asking what happened to you and not what's wrong with you, or vice versa. Yes, what happened to you? Then they start to realize, I can trust this person. And then hopefully in turn, the teachers, of course, with their training, me calling them is not necessarily, it shouldn't be for punishment. It shouldn't be for a consequence. It should be, well, heck, maybe they relate to them better, right? Maybe they can come in and do something that I couldn't. So I do think education trainings like this, a lot of times we shy away from talking about race issues. Once we got back to school after the protests, I think a lot of people tiptoed around it because they were scared of talking about it, right? We were scared to hear the comments about it, because does that mean you're calling me out, that I not do enough? And so I think we have to be less afraid to talk about it, and education and just creating those safe spaces, right? Because I can talk about it all day, but if I know that it's not going to be a safe space for me, then I might save that for when I get home. So being very intentional in creating those safe spaces, either at school or at church or wherever, this is a safe space where you can share what you are feeling. That's my answer to that one. Thank you. But y'all have been amazing. I really wanted this to be like a discussion. So I appreciate you all hanging in there with me, and everybody on this call. I truly, I'm looking at your names and you mean something to me. So I truly thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
No
Sharika.
post-trauma. Yes, Dr. Downey, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Well, again, I thank you all. If there's no other questions, I'm gonna let y'all go. I've kept you for an hour, but I truly appreciate it. And feel free to reach out to me if you need anything or have any questions. I like to talk, so I'm gonna put my email in the chat. There we go.
Great job, Sharika.
Thank you, Dr. Cousin.
Thank you. Bye, Dr. Cousin.
Great job, sweetheart. Love you.
Thank you. Love you. Thank you, Shanetta.
Great job, Dr. Smith.
Thanks, Doug.
And Dr. Carter, I meant to say that earlier and was driving, so I apologize.
I'll let her know. She hopped off, but I'll tell her.
Or Dr. Adams, you know, I don't change very well.
Bestie, that was just amazing. I just can't even handle it. I can't even, you just did such a great job, and I can just cry, you know, because I'm just